The following narrative draws inspiration from in-depth research conducted by Peter Brand, particularly highlighted in his 2015 article, The Killing of Charlie Storms by Luke Short. Additionally, the story includes valuable excerpts from the acclaimed work of William Bat Masterson, Famous Gunfighters of the Western Frontier, which offers rich insights into the lives and legacies of renowned figures from the Old West. This podcast episode weaves together factual accounts and historical context to paint a vivid picture of the events surrounding Bat Masterson's visit to Tombstone in 1881. When Bat Masterson arrived in Tombstone, he met Wyatt Earp and several of his formidable associates, including Rickabaugh, the owner of the Oriental, and Ed Harris, a former saloon owner in Dodge City. They shared with Bat the exciting news that he would be joining a consortium responsible for managing the Oriental Saloon, reputed to be the most opulent gambling establishment in the entire Arizona territory. Its lavish decor and rowdy atmosphere made it a hub for gamblers and a backdrop for high-stakes gambling. The Oriental Saloon, which opened its doors to the public on July 22, 1880, was a significant addition to the newly established town of Tombstone, embodying its ambitious spirit. An article in the Tombstone Daily Epitaph highlighted the saloon's elegant design, noting it featured 28 chandeliers that provided ample illumination, creating a bright and inviting atmosphere. The establishment consists of two distinct sections. The bar area, located to the right of the main entrance, boasts intricately carved woodwork, finished in white and gilt, complemented by a polished countertop. Behind the bar are sideboards initially crafted for the Baldwin Hotel in San Francisco. The back room is furnished in the style of an upscale club, adorned with a luxurious Brussels carpet and offering facilities suited for card games, particularly appealing to those who engage in high-stakes gambling. This opulent setting marked a noteworthy achievement for Tombstone, and the community celebrated the efforts of Messrs. Joyce & Company in creating such a remarkable venue. However, beneath the glimmering facade of the saloon lay a shadowy peril. A rival faction of gamblers was intent on claiming a piece of the lucrative pie that the Oriental offered. To counter this threat, Bat was called upon not only for his connections and influence, but also for his formidable skills as a gunslinger and gambler, a fact that was as well known as his adeptness with the faro box. During a lively evening spent with Wyatt Earp and his companions, Bat witnessed firsthand the intricate dynamics of the local power struggles as Wyatt shared in-depth intelligence regarding the Slopers and their scheming attempt to seize control of the Oriental Saloon. Wyatt recounted a significant confrontation from early October 1880, where Doc Holliday found himself at odds with a notorious troublemaker, Johnny Tyler, who had established a reputation for causing turmoil within the saloon's volatile atmosphere. Wyatt detailed how the tension in the air escalated as Holliday, known for his quick temper, confronted Tyler directly, issuing a challenge to settle their differences through a fight there and then. Nonetheless, instead of standing his ground, Tyler, recognizing Holliday's fierce reputation and quick draw, succumbed to fear and made a hasty retreat, choosing to abandon the confrontation rather than face the wrath of the fearsome Doc Holliday. The owner of the Oriental, Milt Joyce, who disliked Holliday and the Earps, continued the argument with Doc. Joyce had Holliday thrown out of the saloon, but the deadly dentist soon returned, revolver in hand. Holliday discharged several shots, injuring Joyce in the thumb and hitting Joyce's partner, a man named Parker, in the big toe. Joyce then took a shot that missed its target, but managed to hit Doc over the head with his revolver. A law officer named Bennett arrived on the scene and separated the men. Shortly after assuming his role at the saloon, Bat found himself at the epicenter of a fierce confrontation. The Slopers, a notorious West Coast gang with designs on taking over the Oriental, sought to oust Earp and his team using intimidation and violence. In this treacherous endeavor, they had enlisted the services of Charlie Storms, a seasoned gambler and deadly gunman known for his ruthless efficiency. Unexpectedly, Bat had a history with Storms. Their past encounters had been marked by mutual respect, which complicated Bat's thoughts about the coming conflict. As tensions escalated within the saloon, where laughter mingled with threatening whispers set the scene, Bat prepared himself for a showdown that could determine the fate of the Oriental and its place in the lively, volatile streets of Tombstone. The story further escalates with Luke Short, a 27-year-old with deep roots in the verdant hills of Arkansas, who recently made his home in the rugged and rapidly evolving town of Tombstone. Having resided there for only 2 or 3 months, Luke finds himself drawn into the pulsating life of this frontier settlement. He has assumed the role of a lookout, actively navigating the agitated waters of the local gambling scene, an industry rife with both lucrative opportunities and precarious risks. One particularly memorable incident occurred at the Oriental Saloon on February 25, 1881. As a fierce windstorm howled outside, disrupting the usual revelry, tensions inside the saloon began to rise dramatically. Amid the swirling dust and chaos, a notorious professional gunfighter and gambler named Charlie Storms strode into the establishment, his brash demeanor immediately commanding attention. Emboldened by the chaos around him, Storms began to boast loudly about his supposed combat skills and daring exploits, declaring with a swagger that he could beat anyone in the room in a showdown. His bluster echoed through the saloon, and his irritating boastfulness quickly shifted from mere annoyance to outright hostility. A tense confrontation unfolded when Charlie brandished a gleaming Colt revolver, pressing the barrel intimidatingly under the nose of the card dealer, Rickabaugh. With a fierce glare, he declared that Rickabaugh would meet a grim fate if he dared to turn another card. The atmosphere thickened with unease as the stakes escalated. Just then, Short, sensing the brewing trouble, intervened. In a brazen display intended to provoke, Storms turned his ire toward Luke Short, hurling a crude and menacing taunt. "I'll serve you a lesson, you son of a bitch," he proclaimed, eyes glinting dangerously as he openly challenged Luke. The air thickened with tension, and the saloon patrons held their breath, anticipating the inevitable clash between these two fierce personalities. However, before the situation could spiral further, before any hammers could be cocked, Masterson stepped in, positioning himself firmly between the two men to defuse the escalation. Undeterred by the formidable challenge at hand, Luke Short remained steadfast in his composure, exuding a quiet confidence as he asserted his request for Charlie Storms to abstain from making any more inflammatory remarks. Luke's intention was crystal clear: to alleviate the mounting tension in an increasingly volatile situation where emotions were running high, and the delicate boundaries between civility and conflict were perilously thin. Despite Luke's effort to advocate for calm, Storms was resolutely resistant to the notion of de-escalation. Fueled by his own stubbornness, Storms preferred to stoke the flames rather than extinguish them. As the debate intensified, the air crackled with animosity, and Luke, feeling the pressure, found himself resorting to pointed language. In a moment of frustration, he lashed out at Charlie, calling him an old gray-bearded son of a bitch. The sharpness of this remark cut through the tension, striking a raw nerve and further inflaming the already contentious atmosphere. In response to the sharp insult hurled by Luke Short, Charlie Storms stood up with a confident demeanor, challenging Luke to settle their differences with a physical confrontation outside. Storms declared that he would allow Luke the opportunity to throw the first punch, keen to assert his bravery. Surrounding him was a table strewn with various checks amounting to about $75, which Charlie was prepared to wager as a testament to his fighting abilities. Despite the persistent barrage of insults from Storms, which had begun to wear on his patience, Luke maintained his composure and chose dialogue over violence. In an effort to provoke Luke into reconsidering his stance, Storms suggested that he would willingly forfeit his checks if it meant that Luke would agree to the match. He stressed the seriousness of his proposition, insisting that he possessed the necessary skill and experience to ensure a fair fight, devoid of any tricks or dishonesty. While Storms exhibited an air of confidence in his fighting abilities, boasting about his prowess, Luke remained unyielding in his resolve to de-escalate the situation. His dedication to nonviolence was not merely a refusal to fight, but a deeper understanding that engaging in such conflicts often led to more significant consequences. In the midst of a charged confrontation, Storms brandished a gleaming firearm, its cold metallic surface catching the light and sending a ripple of tension through the air. Luke Short, sensing the gravity of the moment, issued a sharp warning, emphasizing the critical need for caution when handling such a dangerous weapon. With a tense yet deliberate gesture, Storms proposed that they step into the backyard for a more measured and civil dialogue. Luke, recognizing the potential for resolution, nodded in agreement and followed Storms outside into the dimly lit space behind the Oriental Saloon. As they stood beneath the open sky, Storms, with a tone imbued with sincerity, admitted that his earlier remarks were misguided. He clarified that the insult has been intended for another individual, not Luke. Acknowledging the weight of those words, Luke responded with a thoughtful nod, appreciating the clarification, but reminding Storms of the severity of the offense. If Storms truly did not mean to target him, Luke suggested that they let the matter rest and strive for friendship instead. In that moment, a mutual understanding began to blossom, allowing both men to agree to a resolution that would pave the way for camaraderie rather than conflict. Luke Short made his way back inside the establishment, resuming his responsibilities as a lookout. Once the immediate threat was neutralized, Masterson led the volatile Storms away from the scene and guided him to the San Jose house, suggesting that it was the best place for him to sleep off his aggression and moodiness. Meanwhile, back at the Oriental Saloon, Bat calmed his fellow patrons and explained that beneath Storm's ruthless exterior lay a decent person, though they all understood that his demeanor could swiftly change, especially with the return of the Sloper's hired gun, who returned to the saloon, seemingly in high spirits. Storms purchased a bottle of fine wine, a gesture that was not uncommon in the camaraderie of such establishments. He extended an invitation to Short, encouraging him to share in the wine and revelry, which Short graciously accepted, believing that the tension lingering between them had finally subsided. The atmosphere was thick with animated conversations, and amidst it all, Charlie Storms was seated at a nearby table, engrossed in a game of faro, a popular card game of chance that drew a lively crowd. However, as the evening wore on, a sense of unease crept in. Mr. Rickabaugh and Mr. Masterson, two patrons of the saloon, approached Luke with grave expressions etched on their faces. They cautioned Luke to remain vigilant, revealing that Storms had been heard making ominous threats directed at Short, including alarming declarations of intentions to kill him. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Luke contemplated confronting Storms to address these sinister remarks head-on. Yet sensing the effects of alcohol had consumed Storms, leading him to a state of inebriation, Short resolved to postpone the conversation until Storms had sobered. It was a decision made not out of fear, but a desire to engage in a rational discussion, mitigating the risk of escalating an already volatile situation. As the clock struck 1, signaling the end of his watch, Luke Short stepped off the platform and caught sight of Bat Masterson, who was engaged in a conversation with Storms' business partner, Dublin Lyons. The two men stood just outside the doors of the Oriental Saloon, their voices mingling with the hum of activity from the crowded street. Suddenly, the heavy doors of the saloon swung open, and Storms emerged with a purposeful stride. With a firm grip, he seized Luke by the lapel of his coat, his eyes narrowing with determination. "I want to see you," he said tersely, his voice low but urgent. Without waiting for a response, he tugged Luke down the street, pulling him a good 10 feet away from the lively atmosphere of the Oriental, where curious onlookers began to take notice of their unusual interaction. With Luke a few paces ahead, Storms halted and pivoted to confront him, a shadow of tension passing over his face. "You called me an old son of a bitch," he declared, his voice steady but laced with underlying challenge. Luke shrugged slightly, the corner of his mouth twitching in a bemused smile. "I can't recall the exact words I used, but didn't we agree to settle this between us?" he responded, his tone light yet edged with sincerity. Storms' gaze narrowed, searching Luke's face for any hint of insincerity. "You did call me a son of a bitch," he pressed, intensity rising in his voice. "I need to know if you still carry the same integrity, the same strength of character as you did back then." Luke hesitated, and before he could answer, Storms shouted, "You son of a bitch!" He then reached for his Colt. As soon as Storms pulled his barking iron, Luke grabbed his pistol, and both men began firing their weapons. Luke was convinced that both he and Storms had discharged their weapons simultaneously. In Luke's testimony, he admitted that uncertainty clouded his recollection. Adrenaline coursed through him after Mr. Dublin, Storms' partner, called him away for the tense standoff. Just moments earlier, Storms had halted Luke in the middle of the street, positioning him squarely between the two of them. Dublin loomed behind him from that vantage point, while Luke faced the threatening figure of Storms. Luke's instincts kicked in as the first shots rang out, echoing through the otherwise still air. He instinctively circled back, seeking distance from Dublin Lyons, driven by fear for his safety and concern for anyone else who might be caught in the crossfire behind him. In a fleeting moment of distraction, Luke's gaze flickered away from Storms, and he took in the chaotic scene around him. When he returned his focus, he was alarmed to see Storms collapsing, but still partially upright, his head and shoulders raised, defying the gravity of his fall. As Luke scanned the street again, he noticed that all bystanders had vanished, leaving an eerie silence punctuated only by the fading sounds of chaos. Turning his attention back to Storms, Luke saw him sprawled on his back, popped up in an almost unnatural position. A pistol was gripped tightly in both hands, and Luke felt the weight of Storms' gaze lock onto him, as if time had slowed in that critical moment. Anticipating an imminent gunshot, Luke instinctively prepared to evade, dodging to the side just as he realized that Storms had his six-shooter aimed directly at him. In a desperate bid for survival, Luke dropped to his knees and fired at Storms, his heart and his mind racing, haunted by the uncertainty of whether his shot had found its mark. As the echo of his last gunfire faded, he watched in disbelief as Short's hands and firearm seemed to wilt and fall, landing heavily against his own chest. The moment unfurled in slow motion, encapsulating the gravity of the situation that had spiraled into chaos. Short had beat Storms to the draw and put a bullet through his heart.
Thinking about getting into registered livestock but don't have a ranching background? You are not alone. On From the Pasture with Hired Hand, we talk with breeders from all walks of life, some born into it, others learning as they go. Hear their stories, mistakes, and hard-earned lessons about raising pedigree livestock, navigating genetics, and making a name in their industry. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts or visit hiredhandsoftware.com and stay connected.
After the turbulent gunfight had subsided, Luke Short emerged onto the creaking porch of a nearby establishment, scanning the chaotic scene around him. The tension hung thick in the air as a uniformed policeman rushed toward him, urgency in his voice as he demanded, "Give me your gun." Luke, exuding a calm demeanor amid the chaos, replied, "All right," but added a crucial request for his own protection in this volatile situation. At that precise moment, Wyatt Earp arrived, asserting his authority with the declaration, "This is my prisoner." Recognizing the moment's gravity, Luke conceded, "All right, take my gun," relinquishing his weapons into the law's hands. As Luke was taken into custody, Dr. George Goodfellow, a local physician and an onlooker who had witnessed the deadly exchange, stepped forward to take control of the unfortunate victim Charlie Storms's lifeless body. Dr. Goodfellow, with help, carefully transported Storms back to the San Jose rooming house, where both the deceased and his associate, the poker player Dublin Lyons, had been temporarily residing. It was here that Dr. Goodfellow prepared to perform a post-mortem examination to ascertain the specifics of Storms's injuries and cause of death. Following the examination, the coroner concluded that Storms had succumbed to multiple gunshot wounds inflicted by Luke Short during the altercation. The gravitas of the situation led to a brief preliminary hearing regarding the incident, scheduled for the following day, Saturday, February 26, 1881. The hearing was presided over by Tombstone's Justice of the Peace, Albert O. Wallace, with Luke Short represented by his counsel, the adept lawyer William J. Hunnisker. Justice Wallace swiftly assessed the evidence presented before him and determined that no grounds for murder charges existed against Short, ultimately discharging him from any legal responsibility for Storms's death. Meanwhile, Charlie Storms received a burial at the notorious Boot Hill Cemetery in Tombstone, a final resting place for many of the town's colorful characters. Storms's personal life had been as complicated as any Wild West tale, leaving behind two grieving widows, one named Mary, residing in San Francisco, and the other known as Nellie, or Nettie, who held the title of Madam in Leadville, Colorado, adding another layer of intrigue to this tragic narrative. 3 weeks later, on the fateful night of March 15th, a band of ruthless bandits ambushed a stagecoach that was making its way from the bustling mining town of Tombstone to the nearby hub of Benson. In the chaos of the ensuing shootout, both the stagecoach driver and a hapless passenger met their tragic end, the darkness of the desert evening illuminated only by the flashes of gunfire and the echoes of desperate cries. Once more, Bat Masterson's esteemed reputation as a formidable lawman earned him a prominent position among an elite posse. He rode alongside legendary figures such as Wyatt Earp, his brothers Morgan and Virgil, and Sheriff Bob Paul. United by a common purpose, they set off in pursuit of the four elusive highwaymen, traversing the Arizona Territory's arid landscapes over 10 grueling days and nights. The relentless chase stretched their endurance to the limit, but they remained undeterred, driven by a shared commitment to uphold justice. The posse managed to apprehend one of the outlaws at a secluded ranch. Still, the others deftly escaped, leading the law enforcement officers on a harrowing pursuit that covered roughly 400 miles. Riding from one desolate stretch of desert to another, the bandits frequently secured fresh mounts at isolated camps, always staying one step ahead of their relentless pursuers. As the days wore on, hunger and thirst weighed heavily on the posse's resolve. Exhaustion crept in as the harsh desert sun beat down upon them relentlessly. It was only when Masterson's horse finally collapsed beneath him, unable to bear the strain any longer, that he reluctantly acknowledged the grim reality of defeat. With the other law officers faltering in their stamina, Bat and Wyatt Earp, both weary and ravenous, struggled to cover the final 18 miles back to Tombstone. Upon their arrival, however, they were met with another bitter disappointment. They learned that their sole captured outlaw had been returned to town for safekeeping and had brazenly walked out of jail and vanished into the night. Despite the mission's ultimate failure, the hardships and perils they had faced together forged an unbreakable bond between Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp, solidifying a lifelong friendship that would endure through the tumultuous years ahead. As the days passed, Masterson had envisioned a leisurely stay in the spirited town of Tombstone, surrounded by friends like Earp, who shared his fondness for the wild frontier. Yet an unsettling telegram from Dodge had pierced through his anticipation like a gunshot in the night. The urgent message, laden with worry, informed him that his brother Jim was ensnared in a perilous situation, threatening his well-being. True to his nature, Bat understood the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders, and it was again up to him to intervene. As Bat stepped onto the train in Trinidad, Colorado, he settled into his seat, bracing himself for the final leg of his journey back to Dodge City. The rhythmic clatter of the train wheels merged with the gentle swaying of the carriage, creating a comforting backdrop in his thoughts. As he glanced around the nearly empty compartment, his gaze landed on a newspaper, carelessly left atop the adjacent seat. It was the Leadville Democrat, dated March 2nd, 1881. Its edges slightly frayed, but the print still legible. Curiosity piqued, Bat reached for the paper, the crisp pages crackling softly as he opened it. He began to sift through the various articles dealing with the events of the day, from local gossip to political debates, until one section in particular caught his eye: an obituary. The piece was a heartfelt tribute to Charlie Storms, a name that resonated with Bat. The article detailed a violent incident involving Storms, noting that he had seized Short's ear with his left hand while brandishing a pistol with his right. In the following confrontation, Short shot Storms, who attempted to retaliate, but missed. Subsequently, Short discharged 2 more shots into Storms as he lay wounded. The tone of the obituary changed from a straightforward report of facts to a passionate expression of the editor's feelings about Storm's passing. The report expressed, "At last," the report began, now foregoing objective reporting, "after courting the grim sentinel of death for years, and not infrequently gloating upon the outrageous Charlie Storms, the noted sporting man has found his destiny. This portrayal of storms troubled Bat, prompting him to return the newspaper to its rightful place. As Bat looked out the window, he reflected on the many challenges and adventures he had faced throughout his life, and the numerous deaths he had witnessed. On April 16th, as the clattering train rumbled towards the outskirts of Dodge City, Bat's mind raced with concern. The landscape blurred past him, a tapestry of sprawling farms and small homesteads, each a testament to the untamed spirit of the West. Yet despite the vibrant scenery, an unsettling silence loomed over his thoughts. Since leaving the bustling streets of Tombstone, he had received no further word about Jim's predicament, amplifying the urgency of his journey. Bat's keen mind flickered through possible courses of action. He mused over the contentious relationship between his brother and the notorious duo, Updegraff and Peacock. He hoped to act as a mediator, seeking a peaceful resolution to their conflict without violence. Bat prided himself on his ability to navigate the rough waters of the lawless frontier, often preferring diplomacy over gunplay. Nevertheless, his trusty six-shooter rested snugly at his hip, fully loaded and ready for action should the situation deteriorate. He was always prepared to confront the challenges of the Old West in whatever manner necessary. As we wrap up our tale, we want to extend a warm and heartfelt thank you to Peter Brand. His unwavering support has been instrumental in bringing this story to life through his passion and extensive research into the legendary figures of the West. Since 2000, Peter has delved into the captivating lives of Wyatt Earp, the drama of Tombstone, and the intriguing members of Earp's notorious vendetta posse. With a keen focus on the fascinating associates of Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp, he has penned several remarkable books, including Wyatt Earp's Vendetta Posse Rider, The Story of Texas Jack Vermillion, and Doc Holliday's Nemesis, The Story of Johnny Tyler and Tombstone's Gambler's War. If Western history drives your heart, we wholeheartedly encourage you to dive into Peter's works. They are a treasure trove for any enthusiast. If you love what we do and want to contribute to future episodes or share your insights on specific topics about the Wild West, simply visit the fan mail section of our podcast and send us your thoughts. Catch all our action-packed episodes on your favorite platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, and wildwestpodcast.buzzsprout.com. Don't forget to connect with us on Facebook at facebook.com/wildwestpodcast and check out our YouTube channel for even more thrilling content.